The night roared with the hum of engines as Eli Ward stood beneath the city's flickering streetlights, his reflection trembling in the wet asphalt. "Stay in your lane," they'd said. Those same men who once laughed as his startup crumbled. Now, years later, he wasn't just in the lane. He owned the road that led to their empire's gates. Mara Vale, his silent partner and strategist, watched from the tinted car, her voice sharp through the radio. "They'll see the signs in the morning." Eli smiled, a slow burn in his chest, the satisfaction of poetic vengeance unfolding in asphalt and legal deeds. The drizzle turned to rain, masking his grin as bulldozers rolled in. Somewhere across town, his old rivals, Grant Keller, Dane Ross, and Lila Moore, would soon realize the road to their golden tower had vanished under his name. The night cracked with thunder, and Eli whispered, "Let them knock." By morning, the world was different. Reporters clustered near the barricades, their voices rising in disbelief as Eli's name flashed across the metal signage. Grant's company, Keller Dynamics, was effectively trapped, its only access route now privately owned. From her office window, Mara Vale smiled faintly, coffee in hand, watching chaos unfold like clockwork. "Checkmate," she whispered. Eli's phone buzzed with a single text from Grant. "You made a mistake." But Eli simply typed back, "No, you made me." Grant stormed into the meeting room, his fury echoing off glass walls. "He can't do this," he barked, papers scattering across the table. Lila, pacing, muttered, "He already has." Dane leaned back, calculating. "Unless we find leverage, the road and the contracts belong to him." Silence. Grant's pride cracked like the storm outside, and in that moment, he realized Eli's revenge wasn't petty. It was strategic, a trap paved years in the making. Trap paved years in the making. In his downtown loft, Eli watched the sun rise through streaked windows, the city still wet from last night's storm. Mara entered quietly, a folded document in hand, proof of Keller Dynamics' legal surrender. "You've won," she said softly. Eli exhaled, the weight of years lifting but not disappearing. "No," he murmured. "I just took back what was already mine." By dusk, the blocked road glowed with new signs bearing Eli's name and crest. Cameras flashed as he cut the ribbon, transforming what was once their path into his domain. Reporters asked about vengeance, but he only smiled and said, "Progress doesn't ask permission." Behind him, Mara watched silently, pride gleaming in her eyes. The city buzzed. One man had rewritten the rules, and those who told him to stay in his lane were now waiting at his gate. The headlines hit before dawn. Eli Ward buys the road beneath Keller Dynamics. Reporters swarmed every corner of the corporate district, and within hours, the stock trembled. In his penthouse, Eli watched the chaos unfold with quiet satisfaction. But victory was short-lived. Mara Vale entered with an urgent tone. "They're planning a countermove. Grant's already in court." Eli's smirk faltered as the television screen flickered with Keller's press conference. "He's going to play the victim," Mara warned. The same men who once mocked Eli were now painting him as the villain. "Let them talk," Eli said, his voice a mix of steel and exhaustion. "I own the road. Now I'll own the narrative." At a crowded press conference, Grant Keller took center stage, his tone dripping with charm and false humility. "We believed in partnership," he said, "but betrayal hides in the shadows." Reporters leaned in as he painted Eli as a ruthless saboteur. Behind the cameras, Lila Moore whispered to Dane Ross, "He's rewriting history." Dane nodded grimly. Outside the venue, Mara watched the live feed on her phone, the reflection of Grant's smirk mirrored in her eyes. She whispered into her earpiece, "We go live in 30. Eli's rebuttal was coming, and it would burn brighter than any corporate lie. When the broadcast began, Eli Ward didn't stand behind a podium. He stood on the road he'd built. Cameras zoomed in as he faced the skyline, voice steady. They said, "Stay in my lane." I built it instead. His words rippled through the city's screens, echoing like gospel. Mara Vale watched from the sidelines, eyes shining with something between pride and disbelief. Every word turned accusation into admiration. Every pause, a declaration of independence. By the end, the crowd didn't see a villain. They saw the man who turned humiliation into empire. The tide shifted overnight. Social media erupted with clips of Eli's speech, tagged with phrases like #BuildYourOwnLane and #Wardway. Investors started calling, and Keller Dynamics shares slipped further. In the quiet of the early morning, Mara found Eli asleep at his desk, the city lights painting him in shades of gold and fatigue. She placed a blanket over his shoulders and whispered, "You did it." But somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the spark before the real storm. Dawn broke with silence, the kind that hides turbulence beneath it. Eli woke to find a single envelope on his desk. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph of a construction site marked Future Route 19, Keller Development. His stomach dropped. Grant wasn't done. He was building a new road, a bigger one, designed to bypass LIS Empire entirely. "He's not reclaiming the lane," Mara said as she stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "He's declaring war." The morning after the photograph arrived, Eli Ward stood before the city planning board, his voice unwavering. "If Keller thinks he can outbuild me, he's forgotten who taught him ambition." Mara Vale sat beside him, flipping through architectural blueprints, her focus razor-sharp. Across the table, Grant Keller smiled, his confidence returning. "Gentlemen," he began smoothly, "progress belongs to those who dare to move forward." Eli's jaw tightened. The air in the room was electric. Every word between them carried the weight of years of rivalry and betrayal. The meeting ended, not with compromise, but with the silent promise of escalation. By nightfall, the competition turned physical. Keller's construction crews worked through the darkness, engines rumbling like thunder. But Eli had anticipated it. He arrived unannounced at the site, headlights slicing through fog. Dane Ross spotted him first, muttering, "He actually came." Eli stepped out, coat whipping in the wind. "You're trespassing," he said coolly. Dane replied, "We're reclaiming." For a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence between them. Then, slowly, both sides stood still, realizing this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about legacy. In a hidden cafe downtown, Mara Vale met Lila Moore under the veil of secrecy. "We both know Grant's gone too far," Mara said quietly. Lila stirred her coffee, her reflection trembling in the dark liquid. "You think Eli's the hero?" she asked. "He's just faster at playing God." Their gazes met, two women bound by ambition, divided by loyalty. Outside, the city hummed like a sleeping beast. Mara slid a folder across the table. "Inside is everything you need to see what Grant's really building." The moment Lila opened it, her expression shifted from skepticism to fear. "He's not building a road," she whispered. "He's building control." Eli Ward sat alone in his office, staring at the blueprints Mara had retrieved. Grant's Route 19 wasn't a road. It was an underground data pipeline, a network to reroute the city's infrastructure and ownership. Everything, from communications to transport, would funnel through Keller Dynamics. Eli clenched his fist. "He's not just rebuilding," he muttered. "He's rewriting control." Mara entered, silent, placing a key card on the desk. "Then we steal it before he does." Their eyes met, not in hesitation but in shared purpose. The war had gone digital. Under a storm-lashed sky, Eli and Mara broke into Keller's data hub, a fortress of glass and steel humming with electricity. The alarms hadn't sounded yet. 2 minutes, Mara whispered, fingers flying across the control panel. Thunder boomed as Eli uploaded files from a secure drive, his pulse matching the storm outside. On a nearby screen, Grant's security feed flickered to life, his eyes narrowing from miles away. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice echoed through the speakers. Eli looked up, drenched and defiant. "You told me to stay in my lane," he replied. "I built my own network." Lightning split the sky as the servers erupted in a storm of digital sparks. The next morning, the city shimmered beneath a false calm, unaware of the silent war now waged beneath its streets. Eli Ward stood before a massive screen in his penthouse, the data from Keller's servers decrypting line by line. Mara Vale moved methodically beside him, piecing together fragments of Grant's plan. "He's turning infrastructure into leverage," she murmured. Eli's reflection burned against the screen's glow. "Then we take the leverage back." Somewhere across town, Grant Keller watched his systems flicker, realizing his enemy was already inside his empire. For the first time, the man who ruled through confidence felt the sting of exposure. The battle for dominance was no longer fought in boardrooms. It was coded in light. In Keller Dynamics' control room, Grant Keller slammed his fist against the console as Dane Ross tried to stabilize the collapsing network. "He's inside," Dane said through clenched teeth. Lila Moore appeared at the doorway, clutching the folder Mara had given her. "Grant," she said quietly, "you didn't tell us the system could access government grids." The color drained from his face. "It was never supposed to be public," he muttered, eyes darting to the screens. The empire he built on secrecy was now cracking from within, and for the first time, Grant saw what fear felt like when the power wasn't his. The city buzzed with whispers of an infrastructure glitch, but in the shadows, alliances shifted. Mara Vale met with Lila Moore once more, this time not as rivals but as survivors. "Grant's system is collapsing," Mara said. "But if it goes down, so does half the city." Lila's voice trembled. "Then we find a way to control the fall." Both women knew the truth. This war had gone beyond pride. As thunder rolled outside, Mara reached across the table. "Help me end him before the city pays for it." Lila hesitated, then nodded slowly. The spark of rebellion glimmered in her eyes. When night fell, Eli Ward received a single encrypted message. "Meet me at the crossing." He knew it was Grant. The road they once shared, the very one Eli now owned, was silent except for the wind. 2 cars arrived from opposite ends, headlights slicing through the fog. Grant stepped out first, his composure polished but brittle. "You've taken enough," he said. Eli approached slowly. "You built a kingdom on deceit. I'm just reclaiming what you stole." Lightning illuminated their faces, 2 reflections of ambition twisted by pride. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. The storm between them said enough. The confrontation ended not in violence, but in revelation. Grant Keller looked at Eli, the weight of his empire collapsing behind his eyes. "You think you've won," he said bitterly. "But you've only inherited my enemies." Eli didn't respond. Mara Vale appeared from the mist, holding a portable drive. The final transfer complete. "It's done," she said. The sound of distant sirens echoed through the night as Eli turned away. Grant stood alone in the rain, his reflection fractured across puddles like the remnants of his once untouchable reign. The road belonged to Eli now, but the cost of ownership had only begun to surface. The morning after the storm, Eli Ward sat before the city council, his empire intact, but his reputation under siege. Public opinion wavered between admiration and fear. "You bought control," one councilman accused, "but at what cost?" Eli's gaze never faltered. "Control isn't theft," he replied quietly. "It's the currency of vision." Mara Vale watched from the gallery, her expression unreadable, while Lila Moore, now a reluctant ally, reviewed the documents that proved Keller's corruption. Yet even as Eli spoke, his phone buzzed with a new alert. Keller's assets were being absorbed by a nameless entity. The game hadn't ended. It had simply changed owners. That night, Mara Vale confronted Eli in his office, the skyline glittering behind her like 1,000 silent witnesses. "You've won everything, Eli," she said softly. "But why does it feel like we've lost something greater?" He didn't answer, only stared at the city below, where roads and towers stretched like veins of light, feeding his empire. "Because victory doesn't rebuild trust," he finally said. "It just replaces it." The silence between them deepened until it felt like another storm. Mara turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Be careful," she whispered. "The higher we rise, the harder they aim." Meanwhile, deep beneath the city, Dane Ross stood in Keller's abandoned data hub, his fingers tracing the flickering monitors. "You should have stayed away," a familiar voice murmured from the shadows. It was Grant Keller, alive, wounded, but unbroken. "They think I'm finished," he said with a faint, chilling smile. "But roads aren't destroyed, they're rerouted." Dane looked uneasy. "You're planning something bigger?" Grant stepped into the faint glow, his reflection splitting across shattered glass. "I'm planning something final." When Mara Vale received the encrypted file, she almost didn't open it. But curiosity overcame caution. Inside was a live feed, Grant speaking directly into the camera. "Tell Eli," he said coldly, "the road he built leads straight back to me." Before she could react, the screen glitched into static. Panic struck. She dialed Eli immediately. "He is alive," she breathed, "and he's coming for the network." Eli's voice was calm but deadly. "Then we meet him where it began." At dawn, Eli Ward returned to the road, the one that started it all. Fog hung low, muffling the world in silence. Grant Keller stood waiting, raincoat billowing like a ghost of ambition past. "You built your empire on my ashes," Grant said quietly. Eli approached, every step echoing across the wet asphalt. "No," he replied. "I built it to prove ashes can rise." For a long moment, neither moved. The city stirred awake around them, unaware that beneath its calm morning hum, two men stood at the intersection of creation and ruin. In the reflection of a single puddle, their empires collided. One fading, one ascending, both eternal. The sun rose heavy and colorless over the city as Eli Ward faced the aftermath of triumph. His roads, his networks, his name. Everything stretched across the skyline like arteries, pulsing with control. But beneath the surface, the cracks began to show. Mara Vale entered his office, carrying a tablet glowing with headlines. "Ward, accused of monopolizing infrastructure." Her voice trembled, not from fear but from fatigue. "They're calling you the new Keller." Eli didn't look up. Maybe that's what winning means. The silence between them felt colder than the glass walls surrounding them. Outside, the traffic flowed on his roads, but every car seemed to drive further from him. Later that day, Lila Moore approached Mara Vale in a quiet cafe hidden from the corporate noise. "He's losing himself," Lila said, voice soft but certain. Mara stirred her tea, her reflection fractured by ripples. "He built the empire he dreamed of," she murmured. "And now it's swallowing him whole." Lila leaned closer. "Then pull him out before he becomes the thing he fought." Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the glass like fading lines of control. Mara looked up, resolve flickering in her eyes. "If I pull him out," she whispered, "he may never forgive me." That night, Eli Ward walked the length of his private road alone, the hum of distant traffic echoing like ghosts of ambition. Every streetlight reflected the choices he'd made, each one a reminder of power won and peace lost. He paused at the sign bearing his name. Ward Avenue. Stay in your lane, he murmured bitterly. I built it just to get stuck in it. Thunder rolled far off. For the first time in years, Eli didn't feel like an architect. He felt like a prisoner of his own empire. In the stillness, the whisper of rain sounded almost like laughter. Mara Vale made her decision before dawn. With a single keystroke, she rerouted control of the city's network, transferring it to a decentralized system, freeing it from both Keller and Eli. No one should own a road, she whispered, tears tracing silent paths down her face. When Eli discovered what she'd done, he didn't rage. He simply sat, staring at the darkened servers. You ended me, he said quietly. Mara shook her head. I saved what you built from becoming you. The hum of machinery faded into silence, and in that stillness, the Empire finally breathed again. Days later, the world adjusted. The roads still bore Eli's design, but they now belonged to everyone. Standing on the same stretch of asphalt where it all began, Eli watched children ride bikes where business empires once clashed. Mara Vale joined him, her expression calm, unburdened. Do you regret it? She asked. Eli smiled faintly. Only the part where I forgot what I was building for. The wind carried their words down the open street, where the future no longer wore one man's name. For the first time, Eli stepped aside and let the world pass through freely. The city had changed, and so had Eli Ward. Weeks passed in silence before he spoke again to the press, not as a mogul, but as a man stripped of everything except truth. I built roads to prove a point, he said, standing before a small crowd at the old intersection, but I forgot that roads are meant to connect, not divide. Mara Vale stood behind him, her face calm, but proud. Lila Moore watched from the distance, knowing she'd helped close one chapter of chaos. As Eli's words drifted into the morning air, the tension that had held the city hostage for years seemed to lift, replaced by something rare, understanding. That night, Mara Vale found Eli sitting on the curb of Ward Avenue, watching headlights blur into streaks of white and red. You could start again, she said gently, not as the man who built the road, but as the one who learned what it means to share it. Eli smiled faintly. Maybe, he said, but for once I'm fine just watching others drive. A pause, filled only by the rhythm of passing cars. You saved me, he added. Mara looked ahead. No, she whispered, you just needed to stop running. The city lights shimmered on the wet asphalt, reflecting two souls finally at rest. Elsewhere, Grant Keller watched from a distant pier, the water beneath him dark and endless. His empire was gone, his name erased from the skyline. But he felt no anger, only exhaustion. You win, he muttered into the wind, though no one was there to hear it. For a moment, he almost smiled. Power had been his prison too. The tide rose higher, swallowing the reflections of the city he once ruled. He tossed his old access card into the sea, watching it vanish beneath the ripples, as if letting go of the last lie he'd ever told himself. In the months that followed, Mara Vale opened a new foundation dedicated to rebuilding public access routes, roads, funded by the people. For the people. Lila Moore joined her as co-director, their names now tied to renewal instead of rivalry. During the opening ceremony, Mara spoke with quiet conviction. Every empire ends, but connection doesn't. Somewhere in the crowd, Eli Ward watched unseen, his hands in his pockets, smiling as children painted their handprints across a new street sign. The sound of laughter replaced the echo of engines, and the city, at last, remembered how to breathe. Years later, on a quiet morning, Eli Ward walked down the same road. Now open, unbranded, alive with people. No signs bore his name anymore. And that suited him fine. Maravale joined him halfway, coffee in hand. "Feels lighter now," she said. Eli nodded, watching a group of children racing toy cars along the curb. "That's how it should be," he replied. They stood in silence, the city humming around them. Not conquered, not owned, just free. For once, Eli didn't need to stay in his lane. He'd finally found peace walking beside her.